Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Berg, and this is the video presentation number 2 for Macroeconomics 112, class number 31777. In previous lectures, we discussed both the definitions and differences of trade deficits and trade surpluses in a global economy. A trade deficit is when a country imports more goods than it exports. An example of this could be seen by international trade of lumber. In the US, we import most of our lumber from Canada. This is due to Canada having comparative advantage in the manufacturing of lumber, which essentially means they are able to produce these goods at a lower opportunity cost due to their geographical location. Canada's ability to offer lower prices to Americans are what makes buying lumber from Canada so appealing. This is the case for most trades in the US. Due to lower opportunity costs, they are able to sell their lumber at a lower rate than it would be for Americans to produce them themselves, making this option of importing in these goods more appealing to Americans. And this is the case for most of US imports. We run in a trade deficit due to the labor wages, and the cost of American-made goods are higher due to the increased cost of the workforce. Since they have a lower opportunity cost, they're able to charge lower prices to Americans, even less so than what we could produce ourselves, making this more appealing to American manufacturers who are buying these products. This is the case for most of the U.S. economic trade, since we run in a trade deficit. Due to the labor wages, the cost of American-made goods are higher, since the cost of the workforce is more, and this creates a situation where buying American-made products are actually more expensive than the imported products that are offered. Lumber isn't the only industry in which you can see how the U.S. runs in a trade deficit. And other examples include the cell phone tech industry, as well as the motor vehicle industry. Some American motor vehicle manufacturers end up actually outsourcing their parts from other countries, having those shipped into the US, and then assembling these parts in US factories to save on labor and cost of materials, since producing those in the US would increase their cost. On the other end, countries can also run in a trade surplus. A trade surplus is when a country exports more goods than they take in. The exports from China are a perfect example of a country that operates typically in a trade surplus. Their lower wages and cost of materials make it so they have a great opportunity cost than other countries. This allows them to export their goods at a much lower cost, beating out the prices of the countries that are taking in their goods, which is a main source of their economy, is that international trade. They even import things such as clothes, cell phones, and car parts into the U.S. Prior to the 1930s, the U.S. functioned under the laissez-faire principles, or classical economic principles. These principles meant that there should be little to no government interference and or intervention on economic markets. The focus realistically should be more on free markets and private enterprise. Individuals felt as though any government interference would really hinder economic growth. They felt as though our economy was self-regulating and that government interference would only cause additional problems. That economy during the 1920s or the Roaring 20s solidified that school of thought due to the economic boom of the time. However, that was short-lived. In the 1930s, the U.S. took a serious economic downturn, which turned into one of the worst economic depressions in U.S. history. This was something where the government did not have any interference. They did not end up bailing any of the banks out. This led to unemployment rates hitting a record high of 25%. Banks were failing, leading to individuals losing their life savings, and there was just widespread poverty throughout the entirety of America. Due to the devastating effects of the Great Depression, a man by the name of John Maynard Keynes, who was an English economist and philosopher, challenged the classical economic theory. He came up with the Keynesian economic theory, which is the idea that government intervention is absolutely needed, contrary to the prior popular belief that a free market would automatically lead to a better economy and higher employment rates. This is the theory that we continue to follow to this day. Another topic that was discussed in our lectures and discussed in class was the difference between monetary and fiscal policy, both of which are policies that are used as tools that the government uses to manage the economy. Monetary policy, which is controlled by central banks such as the Federal Reserve, really focuses on the changes of the quantity of money and interest rates. On the other hand, fiscal policy, which is policy created by the federal government, which they use to make changes in taxes and other forms of government spending. So monetary policy is really the adjustments to the actual money, while fiscal is really public uses of those funds. Both policies can be used to regulate after a recession in order for the U.S. to bounce back. This type of government intervention, once again, is part of that Keynesian theory, where government interference is needed in order to mitigate the issues that could come from a recession, to ensure that a recession will not lead to a complete downfall, and we end up in a situation such as the Great Depression. Once again, this is contrary to the older belief that classical economic theory, where government intervention is not needed at all, and the government and the economy will self-regulate. These types of policies are also needed due to the constant flow of the business cycle. The business cycle is the changes in the economy over time. There are 4 phases in the business cycle. Those phases include expansion, peak, recession, and trough. The expansion period is an upward growth of the economy, which continues until it reaches a peak, which is the highest point of a business cycle, which then will slope down into a recession, which is the downward slope, which leads eventually to a trough, which is the lowest point in the business cycle. These create the main differences between times of expansion and times of recession. During times of expansion, the economy is on the up and up. Unemployment rates start to drop. The overall economy starts to do better, really starts to boom and thrive. While times of recession, you find that there is a downward decline in the economy where unemployment rates start to fall. These cycles are part of the natural business cycle. This is something that has been a constant and will continue to be a constant. It is up to, and the reason that economists do study these phases is in order to help prepare the government and other elected officials in order to give them the best information to continue growing our overall economy and to make sure that we do not fall too far during those times of recession. Everything that has been discussed in this video discussion has all connected topics. For instance, on the business cycle, international trade is a main stimulant in the economy of both the U.S. and all countries throughout the world that have open policies of trade with other countries. Without goods and services that are imported from other countries, the economy wouldn't be able to. All topics that I discussed here this afternoon are all really interconnected. As on the business cycle, trade really does have a great effect in stimulating the economy in countries where they have open policies and open trade. It really makes a difference in being able to stimulate the economy. For instance, China's exports to other countries such as the U.S. are able to stimulate their economy. And for the U.S., those imports are so important to our manufacturers in order to keep the business cycle going and increase times of expansion, leading to overall happiness and productivity and lower unemployment rates. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my discussion, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much and have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.